So, welcome to the Impact 100 Construction Breakout Session. The point of this session is to help nonprofits who are considering applying for an Impact 100 grant to fund a construction project. My name is Amanda Gordon, and I've been a member of Impact 100 since it started here in Northwest Florida back in 2012. I've served as the president in 2019 and also several times as a grant review committee chair and a grant liaison. I'm here to tell you that Impact 100 loves construction grants. We only give $100,000 grants, big grants, because we want our nonprofits to dream big. We want them to come up with high impact programs that will affect our communities in big ways. We want the projects to be transformational, both for the community and for nonprofits. So construction projects achieve that goal. And by way of an example, I'll tell you that in 2020, last year, 2 of our 4 grant recipients were construction projects. We funded the Alano Club of Fort Walton Beach. They provide substance abuse services, and they will be renovating and expanding their building so that they can serve even more members of our community. They're also going to make it ADA compliant so they can serve disabled members of our community. We also funded the Opportunity Place, and they will be building a counseling and education center for homeless families. So 2 of the 4 recipients in 2020 were construction projects. Impact 100 has a long history of funding construction projects. We've funded Youth Village, and they're expanding their size and creating a new VPK program. One Hopeful Place, which built a commercial kitchen for their homeless shelter, and the Gulfarium that created multiple new sea turtle rehabilitation ponds, as well as the Emerald Coast Science Center that renovated 2 classrooms to create an interactive digital learning lab for the children of our community. We funded Fresh Start that built a family activity center where the children are playing, where the adults and the parents are receiving training. We funded the Chautauqua Healthcare Services, now known as COPE, and they built an inpatient drug rehabilitation facility for pregnant and postpartum women. And finally, we have funded Grace Rides that built a huge commercial barn where they're now providing equine therapy for disabled folks in our community. So as you can see, Impact 100 loves to fund construction projects. That said, construction projects are often some of the more challenging projects, both for the nonprofits and for oversight reasons. You can imagine it's very simple when we have a project or a grant application where the nonprofit simply needs some discrete purchase of equipment or curriculum. That's a really easy grant application. The purpose here for us today is to help you, if you are interested in applying for an Impact 100 construction project grant, to give you, to help you formulate a realistic and detailed grant application that will appeal to the grant review committees that will be reviewing your grant application. I'll tell you that as I talk about this more today, the overarching theme will be that construction grant applications require a little more research and legwork on the front end. So now let's go through the different phases of the Impact 100 grant process, and I'm going to highlight specific areas that are particularly relevant for construction projects. First, let's talk about the grant guidelines. You'll find our grant guidelines on the website at impactnwf.org. Now, of course, all nonprofits should, no matter what you're applying for, whatever kind of project, you should read the grant guidelines because it's very helpful to tell you what kinds of projects Impact 100 will fund and cannot fund. But we're just going to talk about today the particular guidelines that are particularly relevant for construction projects. So you will see that the grant guidelines state that you must expend the funds and be operational within 2 years. Well, construction takes time. So again, this is an area that we want to highlight, that you have to have as much of the legwork that you can, as much of your research, as much of everything that you're going to need to do to complete this project lined up on the front end so that before the grant is awarded, so that once the grant is awarded, you can hit the ground running and get your construction project started. Because oftentimes a construction project will take the full 2 years, and you want it to get started as soon as possible. There'll be weather delays, there'll be other things that cannot be avoided or anticipated. So you want to have everything lined up so that your contractor can start construction as soon as that grant is awarded. Now, another guideline states that projects over the amount awarded must show the ability to fund the total project. This is important with construction projects because Impact 100 cannot fund capital campaigns. So you need to be able to explain to us and show us that you have any excess funds that will be required to complete this project within the 2 years. And by capital campaign, I mean we give a $100,000 grant. Say you want to build $1 million building. You need that excess. You need to show us that you have those excess funds available from some other source. We cannot grant our funds to you in the hopes that you're in the middle of a capital campaign, you will raise the other monies that you need. Now you can show that to us by showing us other donors that have made a commitment, showing us that you've received a loan, been approved for a loan that will cover the remaining costs. Also keep in mind that you'll be applying for a construction grant, say in June, and our annual meeting doesn't happen until the end of the year. So prices may have increased with construction costs during that gap period. So it's important to plan ahead and know that if costs do increase a bit, that your organization can fund those extra costs. Another thing that's highlighted in the grant guidelines is that your project must be a new program or a significant expansion of an existing program. Impact 100 does not fund general construction or renovation if it's unrelated to a specific proposed project. So what that means is, say you currently already have a commercial kitchen in a homeless shelter and your roof tiles leak and your stove needs repaired. Impact 100 cannot fund just a general renovation or general construction of an existing program. You have to show us that you are expanding your program or that you're creating a new program. Now, say your commercial kitchen, you want to take out a wall of an adjacent building and you're going to expand the size of your commercial kitchen and you want a new stove. So now you're going to have 2 stoves and 2 refrigerators, and that this is going to significantly expand the number of community members that you serve. That would qualify for one of our grant projects. So those are some of the relevant portions in the grant guidelines that I wanted to bring your attention to. Now let's talk about the grant application. Our grant application is online, and you will see there are several questions that you'll have to answer. I'm going to talk about the ones that are particularly relevant to construction projects. So this is where you will show us with documentation that your project does comply with the guidelines and that it is a sustainable project. One of the questions on the grant application is, how will the grant funds be expended in the first 2 years? This is where you can show us that you have done the legwork up front for a construction project. This is where you can explain, we will be spending our funds on architectural engineering plans, on a contractor. We would want that contractor bid to be detailed, and you can show us that you have a detailed bid. We would prefer that if it has an expiration date on it. You could imagine again that you're applying in June for a construction project that won't get started until the end of the year. And we'd like to see that your contractor is aware of that and that his pricing will still be valid 6 months later. All of these things this is where you will attach this documentation, whether it's proposals or proof of licensure. All those will need to be attached or uploaded with our grant application. Another question on the grant application, which is important for construction projects, is how will the program continue to be funded after the grant funds are spent? And this can mean 2 things. It could mean if our $100,000 will complete your construction project, we still will want to know how you will keep the project going after 2 years. This is where you can show us your financial statements that show this is how you support. These are the fundraisers that we have historically had and we will continue to have. These are the other grants that we get annually that fund our staff. This is just to show us that this project won't shut down after 2 years. Now, this area would also be where you'll demonstrate if your construction project, if the cost of your construction project exceed our grant, this is also where you will show us where your other funding sources are coming from. And so this could be letters of commitment from a bank showing that they have looked at your financials and that they are willing to loan you the surplus amount. It could be letters of commitment from donors as well. So if you are going to get a loan, we'd also like to see in your financial statements that you have sufficient funds to make that monthly loan payment. So that's where you will put in this question, put all that information in this question on the grant application. There's an area in the grant application that asks about the project, milestones and timeline. Again, the more information and research and planning you can do on the front end, the better, because timelines often shift with construction projects with no fault of the nonprofit, whether it's weather related, whether you will need to look for permitting, construction codes, zoning variances. All of those kind of things can slow a construction project down, and we need to get this project done within 2 years. So if you've looked into all of those things, we certainly do not require that you go ahead and get permitting, that's costly, or that you go ahead and start the process. But if you've looked into it and you can show us in your timeline and milestone section that you're ready to get this started, that will go a long way with the grant review committees. Now, finally, in the application portion, there is a project budget information section, and this is crucial. This is where you are going to itemize the revenues, including our grant funds, that you have coming in, and you will show us the detailed costs and expenses of the project. The more detailed, the better with a construction project. So we want to see how much you make on this fundraiser every year, how much money you're getting from certain donor commitments. And then on the cost side of the budget, we need details. The grant review committee will be hesitant if they see a letter from a contractor that just says, I can build this building for $100,000. They want to see that the contractor has taken the time to review the details and the specs and has listed X amount for drywall, X amount for the HVAC system, because then they know it is a reasonable and legitimate budget that can be fulfilled by this contractor. Okay, so now you've looked at the guidelines, you've filled out an amazingly detailed grant application, and the next phase is a really exciting and fun phase, which is the grant review and site visit process. There will be a grant review committee that's assigned your grant application. Then we have 5 of them based on the different categories for our grants. And these are the women who will look at that grant application and all the fantastic detail and documentation that you've provided, demonstrating that you're ready to undergo this transformational construction project. They'll review all of those documents, and then you will get a site visit. Now, before COVID, it was in person. During COVID, we do it virtually, but it's still fantastic and live, and it's the opportunity for you to show these ladies all the wonderful things that you do with your organization and what you have planned to do with this new project. It usually lasts an hour to an hour and a half. They can ask questions of you either based on the grant application, maybe things that they want clarification of the grant application, and also things that they've seen during your tour, in person or virtual tour of your facility. With construction projects, it's really important that you have your executive director present, a member of the board, and then whoever you see that will become the project manager for this construction project. Now, that may also be the executive director. If you have a small nonprofit, I know that executive director wears many hats, and that's fine, but have someone there who knows the details of this particular project. If you can get the contractor there, that's even better, because then he or she can answer questions about the budget. This group of ladies, they will be looking to assess whether the project is feasible, whether the budget is reasonable, whether they think this project really can get done within 2 years, and whether you have somebody in leadership that can serve as a construction project manager. So now your grant review committee has conducted a site visit. Everyone's excited, and let's hope that you get selected as a finalist for our grant annual meeting. Now, our annual meeting, whether it's virtual or in person, that's the time where you will go and present your 5-minute speech about your organization and explain your construction project. And let's hope that you are selected as a grant recipient. Yay, everybody's excited. You get a big check, a literally big check on stage that says 100, maybe 100 plus $1,000. Unfortunately, that check you cannot cash. So Impact 100 does not hand out $100,000 all at once. Instead, you will be assigned a grant liaison. This will be your point of contact, a member of the board of directors of Impact 100, who will work with you to reimburse you as your expenses arise. They will contact you and you will sign a grant agreement. It's a very simple agreement, and basically it's saying you agree that you will expend that $100,000 as you outlined in the grant application. So here are the important aspects with having a construction grant. Now that you've been awarded the grant, you want to make sure that that grant application was as detailed and accurate as possible, because you're agreeing that you're going to spend the funds as you outlined in that agreement. Now, we know at Impact 100, especially with construction project grants, that there will be changes. There'll be modifications that have to be made, whether costs go up in a certain area or you need to change the way you do something that was in the grant application. And modifications are okay, but you have to know that modifications could cause delay, and we're still on that 2-year deadline. So the grant application, the grant agreement states that you cannot conduct any material changes, anything that's over $5,000, without approval from the board of directors. That, of course, we are as speedy as we can be, but we have monthly board of directors meetings, and so that will cause delay if there are constant modifications. So again, that's another reason why with construction projects, it's really important you do as much work on the front end so you can avoid those modifications and time delays on the tail end. In the grant agreement, you'll also agree to submit quarterly and a final report. They're brief, but it's just to update us on the progress of your construction project. You'll be submitting invoices and proofs of payment through your grant liaison, and the grant liaison will just be checking to make sure that everything you're spending the money on is something that you said you were going to spend the money on in the grant application. Those will be forwarded then to the president and finance, who will reimburse you. Now, if you're a small nonprofit and you don't have a lot of liquid assets, that's okay. We love to fund small nonprofits. You can simply just forward your invoices to the grant liaison, and then we can pay those vendors directly. The other thing that's important with construction projects is that you maintain your records, your books, your receipts, your proof of payment, separately or in a way that Impact 100 could review them, your grant liaison could review them if it became necessary along the process, and that's outlined in the grant agreement as well. So that's a lot of information. I hope it was very helpful. I want you to know in no way should it discourage you from applying for a construction grant. Again, we love to fund construction projects, so this is really meant to encourage you to apply and to prepare you so that you have a very reasonable and detailed grant application that will appeal to those ladies on the grant review committee. I want to encourage you to focus on progress and not perfection. We say that a lot at Impact 100 because we want to see all the great work that the nonprofits are doing. We want to see you dream big and to go out on a limb with a construction project, and we'll be there to help you along the way. So please remember, this year, the letter of intent is due by noon on April 30th, and the grant application is due by noon on June 15th. So get to work and good luck.